GLP-1 is this thing that they're putting in medications now to lower our appetite. And GLP-1 is made by our bodies too, but it's down in our lower part of our intestine, and processed foods generally get processed way up high in the intestine because they don't have a lot of fiber. They just get processed right away. But the higher fiber whole foods make it down there and trigger the GLP-1 sensors to say, oh, we've got food, let's cut off that appetite drive.
Today, we're going to be diving in to some really interesting topics. The first one, do seed oils cause health problems? Are these things that we should be avoiding? We're also going to be talking about how you can lose weight and keep it off, and alarmingly high levels of microplastics that have been found in human brains and what we can do to protect our health. All that and more with me, Jason Wrobel, and Alexandra Paul here on the Switch for Good podcast. It's good to see you, Alexandra.
Nice to see you. I'm excited to hear what you have to say about seed oils.
Well, I think the interesting thing has been tracing where this idea that seed oils are bad for us came from, because I know that in the last 3 years in particular, being on social media as I am running social media and digital marketing for Switch for Good, I have seen just an alarming increase of doctors, nutritionists, people on the carnivore diet, paleo, et cetera, who are, who have been over the last 3+ years talking about how potentially dangerous they are. So let's look at what the science says and take a deep dive into it. So are seed oils actually bad for you? Should we be avoiding them? So let's go to Harvard first, right? Well, let's just start with the heavy hitters. So we can look back to probably 2022 for when this really started gaining momentum, this idea. And the first person who was really kind of quoted, according to this, was a adjunct associate of nutrition at the Chan School of Public Health in Harvard. His name is Guy Crosby. And he was quoted in a Consumer Reports article back on May 31st, 2022, who really, he sort of was the one he pushed back on the idea that these oils can cause bad health. So actually, Guy Crosby was the first person to refute this and say, okay, you guys are saying that seed oils cause headaches, they cause heart disease, it's all of these things. Now, yeah, if we look at what seed oils are, we should probably define that from the get-go in case listeners and watchers are wondering. So seed oils include safflower oil, sunflower oil, cottonseed oil, canola, also known as rapeseed oil, grapeseed oil, corn oil, soybean oil, rice bran oil. And that's a long list. I mean, I feel like when I go to the grocery store, Alexandra, and I look at the oils in the grocery aisle, there are just so many we can choose from. For me, I just want to put a little anecdote in here. When I was starting off as a chef, one of the things I paid attention to big time was the smoke point of oils. And that means things that can sustain their molecular integrity at high heat cooking.
But now, why is that? I've heard that they can go rancid, quote unquote rancid, not only if you don't store them properly, but if you heat them too high. And do you have ideas about why that's even bad? Like, who cares?
Well, to me, I think it's about the rancidity or oils going bad. I don't think that the body can process or utilize the benefits of those oils. If we're eating rancid food, that's something that the body really can't utilize or process. I don't know if there's any specific health worries or specific concerns about that, of eating rancid oils. But for me, it was always encouraged when I went to culinary school, like, don't do high heat cooking with olive oil. Don't do high heat cooking with oils that have a low smoke point, because it could be not so good for you. I suppose we could look that up really quickly in real time of dangers of rancid oils.
I did read that it affects the digestive tract and the microbiome, I guess. So it can have a negative effect. But I can look into it for next week.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, really quickly, it looks like it can increase free radicals, do oxidative damage to the body, and also compromise our absorption of certain vitamins as well. This is very interesting. Okay. So it might not, well, I don't know. I don't want to say it might not kill us, but damaging free radicals does not sound awesome. Free radicals have also been shown to damage arteries and function as carcinogens. So I guess we shouldn't eat rancid oil.
Actually, also they generate high levels of oxidative process called aldehydes. and especially sunflower oil and vegetable oils, higher than those that have saturated fat in them, like coconut oil, or ones that have monounsaturated fat, like olive oil. So that's oils rich in polyunsaturated fats, which are generally the vegetable oils, can release aldehydes, which are supposed to be bad for you.
I think one of the biggest things that, as I went down this rabbit hole, is the concern about high ratios of omega-6 fatty acids. That seems to be one of the biggest things that people are concerned about, because high levels of omega-6 fatty acids can break down into toxins when used for cooking. That could cause inflammation, weaken our immune system, and contribute potentially to chronic illnesses. But the thing is, seed oils do contain high levels of omega-6 fatty acids, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. So omega-6 is a polyunsaturated fat that the body needs but cannot produce itself. So it actually needs to get omega-6s from foods. And polyunsaturated fats can help the body to actually reduce bad cholesterol, lowering the risk of heart disease and stroke. So, omega-6s get demonized because, it appears that they, play a role in reducing cardiovascular risk. The thing is, I've been looking at the ratios here, because this article from the American Heart Association talks about how omega-6s, yes, can be pro-inflammatory, but you want to eat them in the right ratio. So apparently most American diets, the standard American diet, is closer to a 15-to-1 ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s, meaning too high levels of 6s and not enough omega-3s. So the ideal that we want to aim for is either a 1-to-1 or a 4-to-1 ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s. This is interesting because if we think about where omega-3s come from, a lot of people are like, okay, take fish oil, take krill oil, things like that. But for vegans, where I like to get my omega-3s, especially my EPA and DHA from, are microalgae. So I take a microalgae supplement every day to make sure I'm getting my omega-3s. Whereas eating things like chia seeds, hemp seeds, I like to eat sprouted nuts, you get those higher levels of omega-6s. So I also want to say too, from a culinary perspective, I don't eschew seed oils in my cooking, but I have been lately leaning more toward cooking with vegetable broth, and I find that interesting, Alexandra. I don't feel like I lose a lot of the flavor, and I just find it's not because I'm trying to protect my heart health. I had a heart exam earlier last year, and it was fine. But veggie broth cooking has just been awesome for me lately.
Yeah, that's where I come down on the oil question. If somebody asked me about seed oils, I would say, the best thing to do is just to avoid oils altogether. They're processed food, and they're very high calorie. Their processing has chemicals in it, uses chemicals like hexane. And so they're just better to avoid seed oils or oil completely. And we have episodes on that. If anyone wants to hear about more about cooking without oil, we have Chef Del on episodes. He was on twice, 169 and 296, and he does not cook with oils. And Chef AJ, episode 294, she does not cook with oils. And they add such a high calorie to a food. Dr. Furman, whom we also had on the show, he says that can give you a rush of dopamine that keeps you wanting those high calorie foods. And he also says that oils are bad for the gut because they're processed. And he recommends eating fats. He's for fat, but not processed fat, which is what oils are. He recommends avocado, nuts, and seeds. So that's kind of where I come down, is just avoid them altogether. But I'm interested in what you said about the omega-3 and omega-6. Is that what I'm hearing from you is that omega-6 is not bad. It's just that we eat so much of it anyway in our life. Why add more with seed oils?
Correct. Yeah. And a better source, if we want to talk about whole food sources, is whole, organic, or even, sprouted. I like sprouted nuts because they're crunchier and they're easier to digest. You're going to get your omega-6s, your polyunsaturated fats, from whole nuts and seeds. So for me, I snack on nuts and seeds every single day. I've got my little sprouted walnuts and my almonds, my hemp seeds, chia seeds. I'm a big fan of that category of foods for that reason. But again, referring back to this article, it seems that the standard American diet, we're just getting too high of a ratio of 6s to 3s. 15-to-1 is a pretty imbalanced ratio. So for me, it's getting back to that 4-to-1 or that 1-to-1. And also realizing that depending on how we use oils, if we go back to that conversation of high heat cooking, repeatedly using these, fats for high temperature cooking, like fried foods or crispy foods or high heat cooking. It's interesting too, because I'm going to out myself right now. I rarely get fries. When I go out for a meal, I rarely do it. But on the occasion that I do opt for like sweet potato fries or organic regular potato fries, I'll eat a few of them and just be okay with it. I don't need to go and eat an entire basket of it, because I think my body, there's sort of this intuitive wisdom, I think, that comes in. We're branching off a little bit on the subject matter here, but I think my point is the cleaner that I eat and the simpler that I eat, my body naturally craves simpler, fresher, unbothered foods. And when I do go off and say, oh, okay, I'm gonna grab a veggie burger or a basket of fries, my body is communicating that maybe we don't want to eat this way all the time.
Yeah, Dr. Furman would agree with you that because you've eaten healthy for so long, you don't crave those unhealthy foods.
My curiosity, Alexandra, is when we talk about seed oils and we talk about things like olive oil specifically, and we look at the research around the Mediterranean diet or Dan Buettner's work in the blue zones, and we're looking at places like Sardinia, where you have a very high concentration of centenarians. Those are humans who are living healthfully to 100 and beyond. They're not shying away from olive oil in some of these places. We look at Icaria, Sardinia, they're having olive oil all the time. So it's interesting to look at the research from places like Harvard or the American Heart Association, but then say, but the blue zones, they're slathering olive oil on a lot of things. So I don't know. That's where I tend to kind of shrug my shoulders and go, I don't know who's right. But then again, we know in the blue zones, there's a lot of other longevity factors too.
And there are also this article, which you're referring to about whether seed oils are good or bad for us. They're referring to seed oils. They don't talk about olive oil, and extra virgin olive oil is much less refined, because I didn't know this, but oils are bleached and they're deodorized. The canola oil's concern is refined, bleached, and deodorized. So it goes through a process which isn't very healthy for us, according to some people. And then when you talked about the French fries, that's really unhealthy because they're repeatedly heating unsaturated fats, because they usually do use a seed oil to very high temperatures, and that makes it even less healthy. But I think there are some people who say, but if you're cooking with a seed oil at home, it's not an issue because you're not heating it as high and you're not using it again.
Yeah. For me, if I ever do use oil for, say, roasting veggies in the oven, I'm going to use a grapeseed oil, which has a high smoke point. I realize that's a seed oil. I'm using a coconut oil, which has a high smoke point. And I also really lately have loved avocado oil. Again, when I do use it, those are kind of my three go-tos.
Yeah, I stay away from all tropical oils like coconut and palm because they have a lot of saturated fat. And just to talk about something in the news, Robert Kennedy Jr. He's saying that he wants to, he does feel like we are eating unhealthily as a nation, which you and I would agree with him. He says we should ditch the seed oils and cook with beef tallow, which I just want to clarify has a lot of saturated fat. And seed oils have polyunsaturated fat and very little saturated fat. So tallow is really not a healthy alternative. They all have trans fat, by the way, a little bit of trans fat. But yeah, so that is not the answer. I think the answer is what you do, which is, doing broth, using a vegetable broth.
Yeah. Or tamari. Tamari is awesome to cook with. I mean, there's a lot of other
Chef
alternatives.
Dell cooks with water. That's how he cooks his food. Yep. And then he'll add spices and such after that.
Yeah. So I think the conclusion here is seed oils are not the demon that we think they are. Let's just be mindful about our usage. Try and get our omega-6s from whole food, plant-based sources like whole organic nuts and seeds. Then be mindful about our consumption of, as you said, fried foods, oils that are used over and over again. And also listen to our bodies and listen to the wisdom that our bodies are sharing with us.
May I ask you one question from what you were talking about?
Yeah.
Tell me what you think of coconut oil and palm oil in terms of their saturated fat. Do you think that I'm maligning them without real cause?
I mean, I personally have used coconut oil for a long time. I don't use it every single day. I actually think I use it on my body more than I do put it in my body because it's such a great moisturizer and is
I
amazing
always
for skin
wondered if
health.
then it would absorb in and raise our, cholesterol levels. But
Oh, interesting. That's so
I
so
do,
you
I
don't
do. I
use
use
coconut oil on your
oil.
body.
I
Oh, you
do.
do. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because I try not to consume high levels of saturated fat, but again, it's indicative of the individual. Like I said, I went and got a whole gamut of heart tests about a year ago because I just wanted to check in and see what was going on with my body, and we did a whole bunch of tests looking at my arteries and blood flow and everything, and it didn't appear to be anything of concern. So I wouldn't say that I avoid coconut oil, Alexandra. I don't eat palm oil, but I think in terms of the tropical oils, coconut oil, organic virgin coconut oil, I do like it on occasion. And it's not something that I eschew, but it's something that I will use mindfully and sparingly.
Well, thank you. Awesome.
So you have a pretty interesting two-part question that you want to dive into this week, which is a biggie because this is this idea of weight loss and how we do this in a healthy and mindful manner is a big question with a lot of tentacles. So I'm curious what you have to say about it,
And I'm not going to cover it
Alexandra.
completely, and please jump in with your thoughts too. So
Yeah.
this YouTuber asked, how can I lose weight effectively and keep it off long term? And this is going to be an answer that I've gathered from my own experience, my experience as a health coach, which I was for 7 years, and also from researching it. And because it's a big question, I thought it should be a two-parter because I can't really fit everything that I would like to say about this. So we'll finish it next week. But I just want to first start with answering this question by saying that losing weight is, at its most basic, taking in fewer calories than you burn, or burning more calories than you eat. Okay, because people always want to game the system, and that is the fundamental rule. You have to have a calorie deficit to lose weight. And this isn't easy because your body, when you start lowering your calories, it starts worrying that you're going to starve yourself. Okay. So it's a deep biological drive. So as you eat less and move more, the body starts fighting back and it starts revving up a lot of hormones to make you hungry. So you eat more to keep that weight on, which is why it's so hard to lose weight. And on top of that, as your body gets smaller, now you're burning fewer calories overall just to live. So you have to change your eating even more and eat fewer calories. You have to eat even fewer calories to adjust for your new lower weight on top of wanting to lose, to create a calorie deficit. Does that make sense?
Yes. And upon hearing that, it sounds like so much to be mindful of. I mean, I think if I'm curious, Alexandra, if I may interject in your experience as a health coach, tracking caloric intake, tracking macronutrients, tracking micronutrients, do you find that it feels overwhelming for people to the point where they just won't even do it because it feels like a math problem and it feels like, okay, I'm working out, I'm trying to eat healthy, you're making me do math. Do people lean into that, or do you think it dissuades people from actually going on this journey of tracking?
Well, as a health coach, I always do what the client feels most inclined, what would help them. So some people like it because, and I do talk about it later in this answering this question about how important it is to track. That studies have shown that people who track what they eat, however they do it, whether they write it just by hand, like I had an apple at 11 a.m., or they put it into a fancy app like Chronometer or MyFitnessPal, those people who track their intake will more likely to lose weight and more likely to keep it off. And that's just what studies show. It's kind of a basic, really important factor. But some people will rebel completely, and then obviously they won't fit that profile. But it gives you accountability, And it also shows you kind of what you're eating, because humans, we're rational beings, so we can rationalize anything away and so easily forget that we had that soda, which is 200 calories, in the middle of the day. So it is, look, losing weight's not easy. So sometimes, and we all tend to kick and scream if we have to get uncomfortable. But yeah, it's important. I'll just say it. I won't mollycoddle any of you out there who want to lose weight. I recommend you track your food, at least for a while, so you can see where your weak spots are and you can really get an idea. Because there's a lot of people who are overweight who say, well, I don't eat very much, but I can't lose weight. And I'm afraid we're usually not that special, and that really it is about eating fewer calories. It's just so hard because of our food environment and so many other things.
When we talk about caloric intake in this regard, the idea of the quality of the calories we're taking in, as opposed to nutrient-dense, whole food, plant-based meal that is obviously has kilocalories, versus something like a fast food meal, sugary beverages, like you mentioned, which are empty calories. There's really no nutritive value or net benefit. So when we're talking about this conversation about caloric intake and weight loss, how much, in your opinion, Alexandra, does the quality of the calories matter, and does it matter at all?
Yeah, so they've done studies that show you can lose weight on a diet of Twinkies or a healthy whole food diet as long as you're in a calorie deficit. But the problem is, hitch is that if you do just lose weight eating junk, it's way harder to feel satisfied. It's way harder to keep your calories down, because let's say you're on a 1900 calorie, that's the number of calories you're eating, so you can be in a decent deficit, not too much of a deficit, like 250 to 500 calorie deficit. That's just 4 cups of vanilla Haagen-Dazs, and that is supposed to keep you full all day. It's not going to, but if you ate lots of high fiber, low fat, because as we talked about, oil can be quite caloric, high fiber plant foods, you get to eat a lot more volume, so you feel fuller, and it's easier to maintain your kind of eating. And remember that the question of our YouTuber was keeping the weight off. Also, he or she wants to lose it and then keep the weight off. So it's really important that as we're losing weight, we incorporate good habits. Otherwise, after the person has reached their goal weight, they'll just go back to eating the way they did that got them overweight in the first place, and they'll gain it all back. So, but there is one thing, and I mentioned it last week, that I read in an article by Dr. Greger, that GLP-1 is made by our body. And this is the hormone that is injected with Ozempic, or I guess it's to maybe taken orally with Zepbound and all. So, that's GLP-1 is this thing that they're putting in medications now to lower our appetite. And GLP-1 is made by our bodies too. But it's down in our lower part of our intestine, and processed foods generally get processed way up high in the intestine because they don't have a lot of fiber. They just get, processed right away. But the higher fiber whole foods make it down there and trigger the GLP-1 sensors to say, oh, we've got food. Let's cut off that appetite drive. So there could be something to eating a healthier whole food diet. Also in that way will help you lose weight. So I think it's important to eat healthier as we lose weight, but I just want people to remember that there's no magic food out there that will help you lose weight if you're not in a calorie deficit.
Did you know that as we age, our bodies produce less collagen? This vital protein that keeps our skin firm and supports muscles and joints starts to dwindle, leaving us with a few more laugh lines and a bit less bounce in our step. But there's good news. Yes. With vegan collagen, you can naturally replenish this essential building block and get your glow back. Through innovative extraction techniques from nutrient-rich broccoli and carrots, they've crafted 100% plant-based collagen that effectively reduces the signs of aging. It supports skin hydration, enhances joint flexibility, and strengthens hair and nails, so you can look and feel fabulous. And the best part, there are no chemicals, no preservatives, and absolutely no animal products, just pure plant-based goodness. So stay youthful, stay active, and choose Veg Collagen. Elevate your daily routine and let nature help you shine from the inside out. You're just going to go to vegnutrition.com. That is VEDGE nutrition.com and use code S, the number 4G for 30% off. Right? You got it. One more time, vegnutrition.com and use code S4G for 30% off your order. Now back to the episode.
Yeah. And then what about the idea of specific kinds of exercise or movement? I remember reading years ago, because I was a runner. I was a runner for many years. And, when I started learning about sort of thermogenesis and how certain exercises have a fat burning, calorie burning ability, is when I first started getting into weightlifting and resistance exercise and weight training, and realizing that for me, the thermogenic abilities to maintain my weight from doing weight-bearing exercise and resistance training was fundamentally very different than what I experienced as a runner, as a sort of a cardio-based athlete. So what can you say about that in terms of the keep it off part? We've got the losing the weight, but then the keeping it off part. How much does weight-bearing exercise and that thermogenic activity factor into this?
Well, when you say thermogenic activity, you just mean burning calories. Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I got it. I do want to talk about exercise, because a lot of people think, well, if I'm losing weight, so we have two sides of this question, losing weight and maintaining. A lot of people can lose weight, but they really have trouble maintaining. When you lose weight, you lose body fat and muscle. So you don't want to lose muscle, because muscle is really important. It keeps you active, agile. It burns more calories anyway. Your basal metabolic rate will be higher the more muscle you have. And let's face it, we all look better with some muscle on, right? So here I'm going to say that lifting weights is important when you're losing weight, so that you maintain your muscle. And remember that muscle weighs more than fat inch per inch. So the scale might not go down as fast, but your body composition will be changing. And you are going to be smaller, because muscle takes up less room, but it's more denser. So, but there's a catch with exercise and losing weight. And this is what I've heard, and this is what I find to be true, is that diet is so much more important than exercise when it comes to losing fat. We talked about this last week. And the reason is, for folks who didn't hear that, was that when we exercise, our body sends signals to us to eat more, right? Because we're in a calorie deficit, essentially. And then we go after exercise and we ingest more than we burned off. It's so easy to eat more than we burned off during the exercise, especially if we choose the not healthy food route. So that is a big challenge. And since a lot of us only have a certain willpower bucket in our life, and changing your eating habits is hard. If you find that adding exercise to your life is too difficult when you're trying to change your eating, then it's probably better that you just concentrate on eating well and having a calorie deficit rather than adding exercise. But Jason, you mentioned this last week. One of the reasons when you exercise, you feel better and about yourself. Your mood goes up, your confidence, and this can be motivating, right? To eat well. And of course it burns off calories also, but remember that the body's going to ramp up its hunger hormones when you're exercising even more. So you have to really be careful. So exercise is super important for overall health, mood, longevity, muscle maintenance, so many things. But here's the thing. You asked about exercise when you're trying to maintain it. Studies have shown that people who maintain their weight loss are exercising. And it doesn't really make sense to me if losing weight, exercise isn't really a big factor, because it tends to ramp up your appetite, but maintaining it is it's really important, because I would think it would still ramp up your appetite. So I don't know exactly why that's the case, but it is super important if you want to maintain that weight loss to exercise. So we'll talk more about this in the next show, but I want to just give 4 tips for everybody to start their journey, or to help with their journey. So we talked about this already. It's important to write down your food every day. Okay. And then these apps like Chronometer and MyFitnessPal, they can also help you calculate how many calories you should be eating based on your size, weight, activity level, et cetera. And then depending upon how much you want to lose, they'll help you get a 250 calorie deficit, or that's what I recommend, is like 250 calorie deficit, not a huge deficit, because we don't want you to be hungry. We want you to be able to get to your ideal weight in a manner that is healthy, and will mean that when you're gotten to your ideal weight, you'll still eat healthily. And how do you do that? Well, one of the first things is you got to get all the junk out of your home. You got to clean out your cupboards. You got to give away all that unhealthy food. And this can be hard if you share a house with others who don't want to join you on this health journey. But as Chef AJ says, if it's in your house, it's in your mouth. And I have to say that I believe that. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as an aside, my big Achilles heel with food has always been sugar. Too. And for me, I've had to really be mindful of getting the treats out, and have been doing a pretty good job of it, because whenever I get emotional, whenever I feel anxiety, stress, fear, pain, sadness, grief, we could name a lot of challenging emotions, the first thing I will grab is a sugary treat. So yeah, I agree with Chef AJ. It has been years of working on that, and I'll have some dark chocolate. I'll have some organic dark chocolate in there, but it's nowhere near what it used to be in terms of my treat bin.
Well, yeah, because if you are in your house and you want a treat and you don't have anything there, and you have to go out to get it, you're less likely to find something else to soothe you than to make the trek out to buy something. So just keeping it out of your house makes it easier on you. And people will say, well, what should I get out of the house? And I think we all know where our, like you said, Achilles heels are. It's things that you tend to overeat. It's things that are processed, that have more than 5 ingredients you can't pronounce, and that you has like little nutritional value. And it was so cool, because somebody I know from the gym came up to me last week. He's about 70, and I hadn't seen him in 2.5 months because I was out of town and I had been going to another gym. And he came up to me and he said he lost 16 pounds just by cutting out processed foods, dairy, eggs, and sweets. I guess, and he gave me all this credit, and I'm like, what did I say? I guess I just told him how I live. And I asked him if he felt deprived, and he said no, he didn't feel deprived. He was really happy. And so that was really fun. This guy, he used to tell me that he would have ice cream every night and share it with his dog. And so clearly he cut out the ice cream. And so anyway,
what about the
poor
dog?
I said, how's your dog about it? He goes, not happy. Yeah.
Sounds
so
about
another
right.
tip. So really just get that stuff out, so that if you really, really, really want a treat, you have to go out and get it. It will just lower the amount of times you that you eat unhealthy food by a lot. And this is another one that people chafe at when I say this, but don't eat out and don't order in. And we've really all gotten to the habit of having most of our meals prepared by others, whether it's we go to to the hot bar, or we go out with friends, or we order in. But people who cook at home lose weight because we eat more calories from a restaurant. It's got more oil and more salt and more sugar in it than the food we make ourselves. And then when you make that food yourself, you can freeze the leftovers in portion-sized containers, take it to work with you the next day, so that you don't have to go out to lunch. I really recommend bringing your own lunch. And the social aspect is like, when I was living in LA, if people wanted to see me, they knew, let's go for a hike. That was the way to get me. If you said, let's go out to dinner, I'd be like, but you say a hike, and I'm like, I'm there. So how do you handle that kind of stuff in your life, Jason?
This is a dicey subject for me.
Well,
this
you're
is
a
dicey.
cook. You're a chef.
That's it. And so it's dicey because one of the things that I love as a sensory experience and appreciating an art form is to go out to different restaurants and see what chefs are doing, the creativity, the innovation, how they're doing dishes in new and exciting ways. I get a lot of pleasure from that. However, I, from a budgetary perspective, try not to eat out all the time. I enjoy being at home. I enjoy cooking for myself and my loved ones. But I do make it a point to go out, each month. I'm trying to take inventory of how many times I go out. Maybe once a week. So maybe 4 times a month I'll go out.
So much less than the average American who orders. Oh
Is
my
it
gosh,
really?
they go to lunch when they're at work. Then they order in. I mean, it's not always, eating out is not always a culinary experience. It's a convenience experience.
That's a very interesting distinction, because for me, I'm doing it to expand my knowledge, have a novel experience. There's a whimsy and a joy and an excitement around it that I really love. So that's a very different intention. What you're describing is, I wonder if it's a combination of factors of people being overworked and stressed out, too many responsibilities, not prioritizing it, and also talking to a lot of people over the years who simply never learned how to cook food. There are a lot of people who just don't understand the basics of how to prepare a meal at home. So I wonder what the confluence of all those factors are, but I had no idea it was that high, Alexandra.
It's
That's
high, and
wild.
I'll get the actual stat for next week.
Please, because my mind is boggled right now with this.
And I want you to help with this piece of advice, which is about planning your meals ahead and grocery shopping, so that you can eat at home. Because I am not a cook. I'm one of those people who, because of my eating disorders, I was always afraid of food. So I remember my friends, when I was in my 20s, would come to my house and there would be nothing in the refrigerator. It would be completely empty, because I just didn't want to have food around, because I was worried I would binge on it. So I definitely am not the best person to talk about planning meals and grocery shopping, but we do, because now I've gotten to a habit. I know what I like, and I know the things I like. And so we always make sure we have them at home, and I know what meals I like to make. But can you give some tips about planning meals ahead so that you can, and grocery shopping, because people are busy and they think when they get home after work, they don't want to have to, I understand, to cook a meal. They think it takes a long time. And so it's easier for them just to lift up the phone and order in.
I'm going to say 2 things that might be unpopular because they're not necessarily fun. One is discipline, and the second is time budgeting. So when I say discipline, one of the biggest challenges we can put on ourselves is going to the grocery store or the farmer's market or wherever you buy your food without a written or printed or typed shopping list, going there whilst hungry, which there's been a lot of interesting studies that have shown that, you go to the aisle and all the sugar, what do you get right at the end of the aisle? It's all the sugary stuff, all the candy, all the snacks there. So don't shop hungry. I would say have a written list and stick to that list. Like, be very judicious and ardent about how much you align with what you've written down. Don't deviate from that. I also think that if there is a 3 or 4 hour window, consistently a day of the week, for a lot of people, that tends to be like a Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. That varies depending on a person's career and schedule. But for most people I've talked to, it's somewhere in a Sunday, and you meal prep. You get some really high quality glass Tupperware containers, and you focus on simplicity, meaning if I'm going to make a batch of quinoa, for instance, maybe there are 5 different ways I can use that quinoa in my meal prep. I can do a quinoa tabbouleh. I could do a bean soup with quinoa. I could make a sort of quinoa porridge for my breakfast. So simplifying things by having ingredients that can be used in multiple recipe executions also simplifies that process. Beans and legumes are great for that. Like I said, quinoa, brown rice, millet, doing overnight oats. But I think it just requires a lot of planning and preparation, discipline, and time management to say, okay, I might not want to take 3 hours out of my Sunday to do this, but I know that these 3 hours are going to save my health and my appetite throughout the week because I will have planned ahead. So I think those sort of systems are really good too. And in terms of, high volume, depending if you have a large family, this can be a little bit daunting, right? So I got to meal prep for myself and my family. This is not a promotion for Costco by any means, but Costco has a shocking amount of plant-based, vegan, organic products. I've gone there at certain points throughout the year. I'm a single guy, so I don't need to go to Costco for myself. But when I have gone to Costco, for people that are budget-minded and need a higher volume of organic, healthy, plant-based food, there's a plethora of options there. So those are just sort of my basics: is planning, discipline, time management, and
it gets easier, right?
Taking. Oh, for like anything. I mean, once you get in the swing of things, absolutely. And again, it can be just, it doesn't need to be fancy. Overnight oats, quinoa, pasta, things that warm up quickly. I like to prep salads ahead of time too. And one thing about that is a lot of people are like, well, how do you prep salads ahead of time? One trick is you can actually take paper towel and you can wrap it around your greens, and it absorbs a lot of the moisture so that your greens don't go bad quickly. That's a little hack about extending the life of your greens.
I also thought that we learned from somebody, if you place them in their ends in some water, they're like flowers. Yeah.
Yep.
Hey,
too.
maybe you could do a thing on this more deeply, because I think it's so helpful, and I'm hoping I know I can learn from you. It'd be great if you dove more deeply in a future episode about this.
I would be happy to, and share some recipes that I think are not going to overwhelm people, because when we talk about meal prep, planning ahead, I think a lot of people, if they're new to plant-based living, feel intimidated because, my God, I can't spend all day in the kitchen doing this. So we can talk about it. And my mantra is simplify, simplify, simplify.
Quick question. So on a Sunday, if someone is meal prepping, would they cook a whole bunch of quinoa, cook a whole bunch of broccoli, cook some beans, and then stick them in the fridge or the freezer and then mix them up in different ways? Is that kind of how you're doing it? Or are you actually making meals on Sunday?
Mm-hmm. I'm making meals, and I'm portioning them out into either individual ball jars for things like a salad dressing or a soup, or tight locking glass, not plastic. We're going to segue to plastic in a second, which is why I'm saying glass. Invest in the more expensive glass Tupperware containers. They last longer. It's just nice not to have a lot of the plastic concerns that we'll touch on in a minute. So what I'll do, Alexandra, is I will batch cook broccoli, beans, quinoa, etc., but then spice them or sauce them differently, put them in the Tupperware containers so that when it's time for me to have lunch or dinner or even breakfast, all I have to do is just open up that container and I can dive right in the meal. I don't have to do any extra steps of combining this and combining that. It's already seasoned. It's already spiced. It's in the container ready to go.
Yeah, and that's something that people could do as a family too. Be fun. You could have music on, or if you're by yourself, you just put your favorite TV show on. Watch it while you're cooking.
I'm glad you said music, because legitimately, I cannot and will not cook without music on. It is such an exceptional experience to put on your favorite songs. For me, I put on like Motown, soul music, the stuff I grew up with in Detroit, and it just gives me that feeling of joyfulness, and that goes into the food. I really feel like our energy and our state of mind when we're making food has an effect on the food. I mean, we could get off on a quantum tangent about that in another episode, but I do believe our state matters when we are prepping.
That makes total sense. So anyway, I hope you all got a little bit of better understanding of how the body works when we do try and lose weight, and some tips on how to keep it off. And we'll go into it more next week. But I just wanted to suggest that people get inspiration from books and podcasts. And we have Chef AJ, who was on with us, episode 17, and Dr. Joel Furman, whom I recommended. He's really inspiring, episode 291. And then we have a bunch of chefs. So you could just probably Google Switch for Good podcast chef, and they would come up. But and then we also have a lot of people who did lose a lot of weight. Episode 170 with Tim Kaufman, he lost 200 pounds. And then recently I did one with Anthony Masiello. He lost 160 pounds and he's kept it off for years. They both have kept it off for years. So check those out and get inspired by how other people do it.
Well, I want to segue into what I just teased a few moments ago when I was talking about glass containers and why I choose glass ball jars and glass Tupperware containers for my food. And for you, dear listener, dear watcher, you may have heard a lot about the concerns of microplastics. And a new research just came out February 3rd, so very, very close to the recording time of this episode, that the University of New Mexico health science researchers have detected microplastics in human brains at much higher concentrations than our other organs. And the plastic accumulation appears to be growing over time, having increased 50% in the past 8 years. That sounds alarmist. That's pretty scary. Like even me just taking that in is like, that's really scary to read. And first of all, but before we trigger any more alarms with this one, I want to talk a little bit, Alexandra, you and I, about microplastics. So microplastics are these tiny bits of degraded polymers that are in our air, our water, our soil, our food, and they lodge themselves into the human body, including scary, the liver, the kidney, the placentas, the testes, and these have really increased since the advent of more and more plastification. I think I just invented that word, plastification of society over the past half century. So, Alexandra, I know you did some diving into what are the elements that are in these microplastics. And I wanted to pass the baton to you to talk a little bit more about, okay, we hear about microplastics, but what's the concern? What's the deeper concern? What's actually in these microplastics?
And when you say micro, you mean micro because they go down to the nanometer scale, which is about 2 to 3 times the size of a virus. So that's how they can get into all over the body and into the brain. So there were 12 different polymers that were found in these microplastics. The most common one was polyethylene, which is found in packaging, containers, bottles, and cups. But they're all, and we're going to talk about more about these plastics. But so in plastic, like I thought I would hear these things like BPA is bad for you. And I thought that was plastic. No, it's a chemical in plastic. So BPA, BPS, PBA, PBS, oh my gosh, it sounds like, and PFAs and phthalates. These are all chemicals in the plastics that have real effects on our body. And the problem is that they bioaccumulate in our body. And from all that, as Jason said, all that we're ingesting and breathing, and they can take decades for them to decay. And so they're going to be in our body for a long time, no matter what we do. And the more, since we are using more and more plastic, it's likely to get worse. So those are the things that we hear about. Polystyrene is a kind of plastic, but in polystyrene might be PBA, PBB, PFAs, all this kind of stuff. And the thing is that, Jason, I see it now. When you go and buy something in a can, it'll say no PBA. And you'll think, ooh, this is a good can because cans are lined with plastic, especially soup cans.
Yeah.
And you'll think, oh, this is healthy. But no, there is no PBA. They've put PBS in there, which is also bad.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting. Because I always look for that. Like when I get confessional, I don't cook all my beans from scratch. I will go and get organic canned beans, right? Because I want to save time. And like the brand that I get, Eden Foods is the one that I like. It says packaged in a BPA-free can. They
line it. Look at the inside of the can, because this is a big way that we are getting our microplastics is through cans. And you and I think, oh, we shouldn't drink out of a water bottle that's plastic. I'll buy this canned water instead. And no, there's plastic lining that. And also one area that we don't think about having plastic, but we did do an interview with Lydia Wendt about this not too long ago. It was episode 284, and it's clothes. Our clothes have a lot of, if they're not natural fibers like cotton, linen, then they have microfibers and microplastics in them, and we are breathing that in a lot because it sheds and they deteriorate.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. This is like this, the deeper we go down this rabbit hole, the more it feels like doomsday to me. Like it's just, it's scary. I mean, if we go a little bit deeper into this research, they are talking about how, brain tissue from people who've been diagnosed with dementia had up to 10 times as much plastic in their brain.
Yeah.
That's frightening.
And they're not sure if it's because of the chemicals in the plastic, or if it's isn't it that they're not sure if it's the plastic blocking stuff.
Right.
So the actual physical
right.
plastic.
Correct. Now, the interesting thing as we go down into, the theory here is that they're wondering if, plastics obstruct blood flow in capillaries. It says there's the potential for nanomaterials interfering with connections between the axons in the brain. This could also be a seed for aggregation of proteins involved in dementia. We just don't know. This is the sentence that jumped out in this article, again from University of New Mexico. The lead researcher suspects that most of the microplastics in our bodies are ingested through food, particularly meat, because commercial meat production tends to concentrate plastics in the food chain. He says, the way that we irrigate fields with plastic-contaminated water, we postulate that the plastics build up there. We feed those crops to our livestock. We take that manure, put it back in the field. So there may be a sort of feed-forward biomagnification. And the research team has found high concentrations of plastic in meat bought at grocery stores. Yikes.
From it. Also, the meat is often wrapped in plastic and the saran is over it, and it's touching the meat. And so that's something that we also have to watch out for is, like I do, we reuse plastic bags. And after learning all this, I'm thinking, maybe I should, when I go to the grocery store, I take my carrots and I just put them directly into the cart, which my mother, she hates that. She wants everything in plastic bags. But we do use plastic bags for some things, and I reuse them over and over, so I don't have to use more plastic. But I'm thinking now using them over and over probably isn't good because they're more degraded.
Yeah. This is a tough challenge. We think about how long plastics are going to be around, and near the end of this article, it says, we could halt plastic production tomorrow, but it's still a ticking time bomb because it takes decades for the existing plastic polymers to decay into microscopic particles. And concentrations of these micro and nanoparticles in our Earth's environment will continue to grow for years to come. Like, even if we banned plastic tomorrow, we still have to deal with all the plastic that currently exists on Earth. And the scope of this is wild. But what we want to do here is we don't want to just leave you hanging on a thread of, oh my God, this is horrible when we can't do anything. We actually have some solutions here. So we'll dive into some ways that you can mitigate this, reduce things. So we talked about meat having the highest concentration, these researchers said. So reduce or eliminate your meat intake. Don't buy plastic containers, as I said in the previous segment. Have the glass containers for storage, the ball jars, the Tupperware. And, don't heat plastic containers with food in them. Like, this idea that we can just put plastic in the microwave and be okay is like, yikes. It's, that's the thing we do not want to do.
Yeah, when it says microwave safe, it doesn't mean it's safe for you. It means it's safe for the bowl. It's not going to deteriorate. Yeah, true that. Yeah.
Important distinction. Please continue, Alexandra. What other things can we do to try and minimize our exposure?
So let's look at it from ingesting and then also inhaling. So for the ingesting, you're totally right, and all those things are really important. Also, using nonstick pans is not good. So use cast iron or ceramic, and those paper cups. If I were to go to a place and get coffee, which I actually don't drink coffee, so it'd be tea, but tea, I would be like, oh, do you have a paper cup? Well, inside those paper cups, they have like a plastic lining, and the heat makes that plastic lining, more accessible in your body. So that's not good. It melts it. And then also there's different kinds of sea salt that are worse than others. So ocean pollution has caused sea salt. There's different kinds of salt that you can choose. And sea salt is the worst because of ocean pollution. And rock salt, it's also mined. So it's not good for the environment. So here's where we have to balance things, right? Our environmental ethic and our own health. Pink Himalayan salt or Morton salt are probably the best. That they still have some plastic particles in them, but they're better than the sea salt. And then you mentioned last week 2 weeks ago, when you talked about the fires using a HEPA filter. And so because it's in the environment, we inhale a lot of plastics. And so a HEPA filter can really help. And a vacuum cleaner with a HEPA filter in it can help even more, because a lot of our rugs and carpets are full of plastic. And so they're off, that stuff is coming out and we're inhaling it. So getting away from synthetic fibers, oh my gosh, so hard, right? Is a challenge. And as I mentioned, Lydia Wendt talked about it in an earlier episode about buying clothes that don't have plastic. Now, when I work out, I like having clothes that are stretchy, and so they definitely have synthetic fibers. But she really says, don't do that. It's really unhealthy for many reasons. And one of them is because of the microplastics. And you can get a filter, a microfiber filter in your washing machine. And that will help because whenever you wash your clothes, more fibers come out. And so you can put a filter in your washing machine so that the microfibers don't go into the water. After when the dirty laundry water goes back into the sewage system, then you will have fewer microfibers. But I don't know what you do with it. Do you put it in the garbage? I mean, it's like, whoa. And then there's also something for your laundry, for your dryer called a guppy friend. And it captures microfibers and keeps it out of the water system, keeps it out of the way. Maybe the guppy friend is I thought it was for the dryer, but anyway, the problem is that how do you clean out those things after you've trapped them? What do you do with that? But here's the thing, that when I listened to Dr. Rhonda Patrick on microplastics, she has a really good hour and 15 minutes where she just talks about microplastics. She says the best thing we can do is get a reverse osmosis water filter, because water is the biggest way that we ingest microplastics. And then because those things can also take out a lot of minerals, make sure you get a reverse osmosis water filter that remineralizes, because you want to have a lot of those good minerals. Oh, and one more thing is, when you go, that's easy for you to avoid in the grocery store, is don't get a receipt, because that stuff has plastic, bad things on it, has plastic chemicals. And then we have a few things you can do. Do you want to go over those?
Yeah. Two things: cruciferous veggies, one of my favorite foods. We've got broccoli sprouts, cauliflower, kale, broccoli, Brussels sprouts have sulforaphane. So that boosts detoxification enzymes, so we can excrete the chemicals in plastics through our urine, which is awesome. Cruciferous veggies are amazing. Fiber-rich foods are also a good idea, because they help to bind the chemicals in plastics, and we excrete that in our feces, and could potentially eliminate the microplastic particles themselves. And then also sweating. I'm a huge, huge fan of far infrared sauna therapy. That's something that, if people want to investigate, there are places in different cities now where if you don't want to buy your own sauna, you can go and do sauna sessions. But that's a big thing that I encourage, especially with what's in the air. I was telling Alexandra that prior to the podcast episode, my cousin was working in China and Taiwan for many years, and when he finally ended his tenure, he came back and did months of far infrared sauna therapy, was sweating, and there was like black liquid coming out of his skin. That's how polluted it is there. So if we can sweat, even better if we have access to a sauna. I think that really helps in terms of getting the toxins out through our skin.
So
Exercise, absolutely. All goes, really, like exercise, healthy eating. We go back to these touchstones, right? I mean, they solve so many things. They really do.
Wow. Thanks for that. That was amazing. And hopefully people feel like they can do something in their lives to be less affected by these microplastics.
Yeah, it's we do our best, right? Whenever I read these new studies and start to spiral into some sort of doomsday scenario in my mind, it's like, okay, but what do I have have control over? My daily choices, what I eat, how I move, the things I purchase, our lifestyle choices to a degree. So instead of feeling disempowered, we have things we can do, and like all good habits, they have a compounding effect.